and Pin, and introduce Whitney from Resident Advisor, who's based in Berlin. We've just worked together on a project last month. So I like overlapping my work with different things. So thank you, Whitney, for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing really well. All the better to be participating in this activation with you and to be able to spread my knowledge, because I know that sometimes our work is always about demystifying the music industry. And I think that oftentimes music journalism and PR is very mysterious. So let's unpack that together.
Sweet. So you're the editor of Resident Advisor. So can you give us like just the broad kind of aspect of what your work is, when you started, and like how you found yourself there today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the editor-in-chief of Resident Advisor, and previously I was the editor-in-chief at Electronic Beats. But I have been in music journalism since I was 21 years old, starting as a freelance journalist covering the New York nightlife scene, club culture scene, definitely looking at larger trends in club culture, mostly because I love partying. And I remember when I was working a corporate job in New York, I was like, what can I do? How can I make partying my living? Because it's like the one thing I look forward to every single weekend. And I really followed that. I thought it was really silly. All my friends thought it was really silly. And then I followed that eventually to Berlin, where I started reporting on the Berlin scene to my New York media contacts. And I guess like news spread, my writing kind of spoke for itself, because clearly I was really passionate about it, but then also I really prize what music journalism can do in terms of storytelling. I was definitely reporting on a lot of BIPOC scenes, a lot of queer scenes, because I didn't see them covered at all until very recently in the media. But I've been doing this since since I graduated in like 2015, so quite a while now. And then eventually I became the editor at Electronic Beats, and then I moved my way here last July. So it's been quite a long journey, but definitely a really rewarding one. What were your other questions, by the way?
What does the job of editing like Resident Advisor entail today? Like I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's changing. Like it's changing so much. Right now, I oversee all of the different editorial strands of Resident Advisor, whether it's features. So we have news, obviously pretty straightforward reports on things that are going on almost immediately within the industry, whether it's festival announcements, album review or upcoming albums, also controversies and lawsuits that are going on. Certain assault cases, like they're the ones who really follow these stories and update everyone in our community about the goings on hour to hour. And then there's features, which is long form, like the stories that involve multiple characters, for instance, things that may be anything from how meme culture is one way that electronic music and parties are finally promoting themselves, like a trend piece or something, and how what this says about our scene and the narratives that are going on in our scene, because obviously it's very internet savvy, technology forward scene. Then there's anything to straight profiles. So going on a deep dive through one artist's career and then following that story about how it filters in through their work. So there's that element. Then we have podcasts, then we have our film series, and basically, and we have, of course, like our visuals to go along with the visual storytelling side of everything. And I sit and observe the different changes, and I direct the editorial strategy. So everything from a granular bit, which is overseeing a film that's about to go into production or a photo shoot about to go into production and reviewing the creative concepts, to the fine detail of editing when a feature comes in through email and we have to liaise with the writer. So pretty much I'm kind of on all levels, from strategy to really execution. And I like to be very hands-on with my work. So the day-to-day is really crazy, but the fun parts of the job, I also get to lead journalism workshops at festivals, go to like IMS. I went to Ibiza last weekend. That was really amazing. And be able to like talk to people in the industry and network and see what they do. So yeah, everything.
So what do you think is a good way for like a young artist to get on the radar of not just like say you, for example, but a publication or Resident Advisor or Mixmag or any of these kind of black platforms? Like what do you think is a good starting point for like catching some steam?
There's so many different ways. There's not like one, step, like not like a like a 1, 2, 3 step guide. But when it comes to being a young artist, I really would say that with anything nowadays, I mean, I don't always want to lean on social media because I don't necessarily think that that's, sometimes we like talk about platform capitalism. And I think that a lot of times people almost feel like indebted and have to feel like content creators in order to thrive in this industry. But I do think that it is important to build yourself up and be established within a scene, whether that means using social media as one kind of tool and expressing yourself and having your mixes be out in the public, whether that's creating a website so people can access your contact information, see what you're about, see what your aesthetic is about, be able to access your mixes so you have regularly updated hubs that when someone Googles your name, like you want to be able to present your work in a very easy to find way, whether that is going to clubs that you know that you would want to be booked at. Usually sometimes when one way to access me, for instance, would be going to like my favorite party. And I guess like being able to embed yourself in a scene. So you're someone who, you know, people have listened to your work, people like know what you're about. There's another element, which is if you have a project, whether this is like on the production side or like the DJing side, if you have a project, if you're a producer and you're coming out with an album, it has to have a really compelling story. Like, yeah, obviously you want the song to like, you want them to be bangers. You like want to have something that's really interesting or sonically, but at the same time, like I like things that one, either the artist has a really compelling story. Jalen, for example, amazing, incredible footwear producer based in Gary, Indiana, was working in a factory, chipping away with her footwork productions. That is a really compelling story before getting it big and all of a sudden is like scoring ballets, for instance. That's a really compelling personal story. But then also you might have a really compelling story when it comes to one of your projects. First person that comes to mind is like Nazar, who released in 2020 his debut album on Hyperdub. And Nazar's entire concept around the album was unpacking Kuduro in relation to his relationship with his father, his experiences in Angola, and surviving a lot of the war and tumult that was going on when he was a young child. Like these are like, what are the ways that you're using your sounds and your music to tell your personal story that no one else can tell? And that is what makes you unique. So there's the element of the socialization element, which is being on the ground, being in the scene, being someone who is relatively accessible. There's a storytelling element. And there's also, of course, like your internet presence and like building your website, your portfolio, whatnot, so people can access you. So I can see it being 3 ways. And of course, like I'm someone who's on the ground, who's always like looking, I'm hearing DJ sets, I'm going to I'm going to various parties. I'm always hunting for talent. And I think that at RA personally, I don't know how it is for every single magazine, but we have a music committee where we have like, all the employees in our company are able to submit new up and coming artists whose work we're really excited by. And this all kind of funnels in, like we're always going to festivals, we're always going to clubs. So if you end up being booked at a certain club or a certain festival where you know RA might have a presence there, or you know that media is going to be there, you don't know who's going to be in the crowd. You would be very, very surprised. And I think that those kind of serendipitous moments when all of a sudden, for instance, this is like the most, sorry, I'm like rambling, but
no, it's fine.
For instance, I was biking next to Tempelhof. For those of you who don't know, Tempelhof is a large park that used to be an airfield, and it's 15 minutes away from my house. And I was biking, I was on my way home. All of a sudden, I hear that someone was DJing in the middle of Tempelhof. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I love this track. I'm going to go bike and see what it is. All of a sudden, I realized that it was this drum and bass DJ from Bristol who does like bike tours all around Bristol, but then decided to do it in Berlin. And I like went up to, I was like, oh my God, I love this track. For one, like I recognized the track. I loved all the subsequent tracks. And I went up to him and I was like, hey, I'm an editor at RA. Like this, what's your story? Found him on Instagram. I found that no one else had reported on him in the media other than like a BBC TV spot. And I was like, this is an amazing story. Like, I really want to feature him. And it was just like those serendipitous moments, you do not know what's going to come when you play your next gig. So, you know, always give your all, and you'll see progress. After being in the industry for, I remember like around the 5-year mark, I was really frustrated with the fact that I wasn't getting traction as a music journalist, but you build, people start noticing, and you have to just rely on the years that will layer on, and then eventually you'll definitely get some traction in the scene. So that's a lot of information, but yeah.
Do you think it's the same for like music journalists coming up? Obviously, you must get pitched loads of ideas and people coming to you all the time. Like, is it exactly the same for journalists standing out? Is it just strictly on the strength of their work, or is it the way they do things that might catch your eye?
Honestly, I'm pretty accessible, me and like the editorial team, for young journalists out there. I know it's harder for DJs to get noticed because it's just it's like I guess there's like different getting coverage, because coverage is so finite. For instance, there's only like 12 features per month. It's a really small amount of spaces to cover specific artists, and you're trying to fit these like profiles with other scene pieces, with other cultural criticism. But on the journalist end, for those who are interested in music journalism, it is actually pretty easy to pitch editors if you have an amazing idea. Like, ideas speak for themselves. And I know, for instance, when I got my start as a music journalist, my first place where I got placed was The Guardian. And this was like, this was kind of unheard of. I think this is like that's what set me on this journey to eventually continue storytelling. But I just found an editor's email on the internet, because The Guardian lists all of their emails on the internet. Or, you know, you can go hunt on Google. You can hunt for my email address easily on Google or on my Instagram. And then I just cold pitched this editor. And a lot of people say that you have to have, you know, relationships with your editors, all this stuff. That is true for some publications. But in this instance, when I was first starting out, I knew I had a good idea. I had studied it for like a whole year. I changed my thesis, my university thesis, into an 800-word article. And I knew that I was the expert in this specific realm that they probably wouldn't know about. And I knew that I was a unique voice and I wanted to tell this story. So I basically wrote it down in paragraph form. There's so many resources on Google too, for you to be able to be like what makes a good pitch. Looked at those, like reread, you know, wrote up the whole thing, had my friends like look at drafts of the pitch. And then I sent it. And within the next day I woke up and the editor had made some tweaks to my pitch, but was like, yeah, like we're interested in the story. Let's move forward on it. So you would be really surprised. There's a lot of reception. And I think that don't be afraid to chase editors. But if you don't hear back after maybe 2-3 times, likely they're not interested. But there's pitches that land in my inbox. And when I'm really impressed with the quality and the research, I definitely will commission it. And we definitely talk in the editorial team about pitches that we're really excited about.
And that can be coming from anywhere. I guess like a lot of the club infrastructure in the UK is centered around London. But, you know, there's the whole big country like that doesn't usually get covered. Could you, not to say you should think of a story, but it's like, how do maybe people look at their own surroundings and not be focused on what Resident Advisor is already kind of publishing? It might be, you might look on Resident Advisor and think, oh, I need to publish this type of content to get featured. How do like people like build a confidence in just what they're seeing, like being interested in themselves, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I think that to go back to your point a little bit, there's a lot of coverage in London, but under my editorial strategy, I'm really interested in a lot of the scenes that people don't usually cover. So whether that's like, Dublin, we haven't covered Dublin in a really long time, or like Marseille, we're always interested in scene pieces that are outside what you would normally cover. For instance, we had this radio station, Oroko Radio, that we covered, that's based in Accra, Ghana. We were like, these are the stories that we want to bring forward. And I don't think by any means, just because you're in a city, that means that, I'm not interested in covering your story. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's just, yeah, there's like a lot of people that are based in cities, so that's what they know. As for, sorry, could you reiterate that question? I just kind of got off on a tangent, but then.
No, that was kind of like the answer. Don't forget, guys, you can ask questions in the chat if you want to, or you can,
Yeah, ask me questions in the chat if you're curious. But also we can continue this conversation too.
Yeah. So, like, I guess dealing with all of that incoming, like, how do you like personally manage your time? Like, a lot of people, like, they work basically all the time. Like, how is your kind of personal management of all of this stuff going?
Okay, so specifically if you're if you're a writer, I definitely pay attention to your pitches, because if you do pitch in your email, all caps pitch, and then the story idea, and I know you're a writer, I will open your email before I will open a lot of PR emails, because there's so many PR emails, like not 100, but like I get hundreds all the time. But if you're a writer, I always put you as priority, because I know that we're always looking for new writers. We're always looking for new voices. I definitely want to see your writing samples as well before I commission, or even some of my editors jump on the phone. So there's a lot of back and forth, and we ask you a lot of questions before we commission to make sure you're the right person. And then also, in terms of your second question, which was the day-to-day and how I manage things, I will tell you that the to-do list, it never ends, and there are always more ideas and editorial. Like, we're constantly having to sift through ideas and various timelines for projects. For instance, when I partnered with you, Elijah, on the guest editor month, we had so many deadlines, right? There was one for visuals, getting in the visuals, and there was like a deadline for the podcast and the turnaround after you did your talk that was live. And we're constantly having to negotiate these things, but I basically have a really strong Google Calendar. I have a physical calendar. I have several notebooks where I write down my to-do list every single day. And obviously there's certain things that I prioritize over other things. I prioritize definitely the theme months and like the guest editor months that I have, because I know that we're working with someone external, which is really important to value their time. And I definitely value just the execution of like just larger campaigns in general. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult to balance a lot of these things, but thoughts on the London queer and its coverage. I think we deserve way more insight coming from a punk Bengali Ukrainian. It's anything. You will need to see more of a squad on becoming a sound, so don't necessarily get coverage around the world. Well, I would say that if there is an idea, well, one thing is we have a contributor network that are based all around the world. So there's people in London, there's people all around the various cities, whether it's a capital or their country managers, and they're the ones who are supposed to feed us ideas. And one person actually pitched us an idea on the first queer strip club that's in London, I believe. And we're working on, I'm hopefully it'll pan out, working on a story in that regard. But I also know that there's always a lot more coverage that can be written about. But if also, like, my inbox is welcome for you to submit certain ideas. If you don't necessarily think that you're the right person to write it, but you think that there's a story idea there, then that's also, a complete possibility. Harpies, exactly. Yeah. So we were talking about that in more of a perspective. I think when they pitched us about the story, it was the fact that there was a Guardian article that was recently written about how a lot of trans people are being targeted in the UK. And so the Harpies wanted to shed light on that trans awareness and have that be the angle in their profile and the ways that they're trying to, I guess, reform their door policies or safety around educating the community, things like that. So that's definitely something that's on our radar. But then coming from up here, people need to be more of a squad. Yeah, what are, I guess, the squad and up and coming sounds that shape queer culture don't necessarily get coverage. I'd be curious about listening to any kind of SoundCloud links or any kind of artist suggestions that you might have, because if you have this scene that you're tapped into and you think there's a really compelling story there, what are they doing that's so different from everyone else? Like what defines them against the landscape of other London nightlife? These are things that of course, this is the reason why we want journalists from all different backgrounds, all different geographic areas, because there are certain stories that I myself, based in Berlin, will not have access to because I don't frequent London parties that often. But I would love to. Yeah, I'll drop my email in the chat actually, and you can. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, I guess, about like PR and the relationship like with PRs in general. It's one of these kind of like murky things that people don't know, like who the right people are. Like, should people be just hitting up journalists themselves and DJs? Like, how much of that should artists just take responsibility for, or should people use agencies? Like, what's the kind of best? Not there's I guess there's no best, but like, what's the kind of ones that catch your attention the most?
Thing is that there's instances where okay. There's an example of this artist that I went to go see at a festival. I went to Waterworks, and I remember like walking through the trees and like hearing this really good, like this really sick jungle blend, like this ASAP Rocky and this jungle blend. I remember going up to this stage and being like, this is a really good set. I don't know who this person is. It turned out to be this artist, Toshiki Ota. And I just, I followed this person on Instagram, and just recently, Toshi just reached out to me and was like, hey, like, I don't have, we talked a little bit on Instagram because I really liked his set. I thought he did a really great job. And we just chatted about like London junglists or something like that for a bit. But he approached me, he was like, I don't have a PR, but I am really interested in doing a podcast. And I hope this is not too forward. And the thing is that I don't mind requests like this at all, as long as we've had some kind of relationship, or I've like, expressed admiration. Is that I know that this is probably a rare case sometimes, like I can't be everywhere all at once. But in that instance, like I had this personal connection with someone, like I appreciated their craft. And the fact that he requested that, it didn't bother me at all. I just say that I can't honor every single request, because there's definitely like a finite amount of slots where I can put people in where I definitely want to support them, whether it's, hopefully it's going to happen in like the long term, but it's not as immediate as I would like it to be. As for PR, we definitely reach out. I would say that, okay, there are certain sections that have more interface with PR than others. For instance, news works really closely with PR because PR usually gives them festival announcements, album announcements, what's going, like someone's teasing a new single. These come directly from PR, and news is always sifting through these PR releases in order to inform the public. So that's on news. Podcasts, which is our mix series. Yes, usually we like to time things with like new albums and everything. So sometimes they interface music releases, like our music section. Andrew constantly has to look up for new singles to review, for new albums to review, new EPs to review. So there's a lot of PR on that side. I would say for the rest of the things, which are more evergreen, so the exchange or the video portion / features, yes, we do have certain interface with PR, but for the most part, we are really interested in more free form ideas where we'll involve artists if they happen to adhere to the idea. For instance, what's the most recent one that we did that was okay? I'll think of, there's this one piece that I recently commissioned. Oh, okay. Would you and the openness when it applies to string, would you say that a sense of openness also applies? Yes, actually, we are interested in, this is a very targeted question, but we are interested in audio projects. So Martha, our head of podcasts, she is looking to commission and is very open to various ideas that people might have in terms of, so there's 4 formats that are going on. You heard it here first. This is the insider knowledge. There are 4 formats. We're switching from just the exchange to 4 series formats because we want to diversify our audio offering. So the first one is Critics Roundtable, where all the critics at RA will sit down, talk about the music releases, things that are getting them buzzing, certain things that are not, what's going on in the scene. There's Reflections, which is everyone who has written a feature or something like that, or a brilliant news piece, they sit down and they talk about the process going into that, any kind of findings or developments since that feature had been published. Then there's also source material, which is a documentary series. And this is more like, the traditional, if you've listened to like Hidden Brain or something, or like, storytelling where there's multiple interviews and people are just walking you through the whole process. And there's one last one, which is, I think, going to be more of like a crowdsourced thing where people send in voice notes. We have like a prompt and people send in voice notes about, their first experience, like dancing at the club or like their favorite festival or something, that we like collate that into a narrative. These are all kind of, I think that one's still being formed, but source material is, for example, one audio project that we're really open to hearing certain ideas. And I think that one of the most recent ideas that we're doing is about the First Nation Aborigine community in Australia, and how their like consideration of identity is feeding into how they show up in the club scene, like the local club scene. Okay, any suggestions for ways to start alternative clubbing stories through radio broadcast projects? Okay, well, I guess it depends on what level of broadcasting you're in. So like, there's like the college radio aspect of things. I don't know, or university radio. That's one really great way to get started and like start your portfolio. Other ways would be, you can honestly just publish things on your own SoundCloud too. And you want to give someone an example of something. So if you think you have a really good idea, or like you want to be able to transfer your ideas in an audio format, I would just say, listen to your favorite podcast, be like, how are they making this a compelling, like, honestly, just be critical and think about how are they making this a really compelling audio format? Like, what are the ways that they're writing this, or they're using sound effects or sound design, the way that they're doing call outs to listeners that brings me into this, and I try to replicate that in your own form of storytelling. Invite various interviewers in and then weave it all together. Whether that's, your friend that can help you with audio editing, or you fiddle around with audio editing yourself, and then have these work samples available so you could potentially pitch people for podcasts. I feel like everyone left, right, and center is also starting their own podcast because it's become a lot more democratic. There's like always jokes on TikTok about like men who are, I don't know, like men's rights podcasters. So it's like it's very accessible. Technology has made it very accessible now. So if you want to start telling alternative stories, like, buy a microphone and get started, I guess.
Yeah, like I'd say as well, just to add to that, just whatever your ideas are, just do shorter versions of them first, and then whatever sticks, you can extrapolate it or make bigger ideas out of it later. And that's with songs too, when a lot of the like coolest producers and musicians that I follow, they're posting snippets of their songs on Instagram or on TikTok or whatever, and then people are like, hey, this is the one, and then it just gets developed into a real song. And that's what kind of like keeps the thing buzzing and makes the following the actual artist really interesting. That's what makes things really stand out. So yeah, that's how I've become fans of so many different artists over the last couple of years.
I also know that YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, they're all pushing. Well, YouTube is pushing this new format, shorts. TikTok, obviously video driven. And then because TikTok is dominating everyone's attention, Instagram is pushing reels. So if you wanted to do a podcast that is going to be pushed by the algorithm, maybe that's a format to experiment, a really short form format. Like Elijah said, does a little bit of storytelling, and then you can expand on your storytelling, or like gives a snippet of your podcast with some kind of visualization. Know that the algorithm is going to buoy that to a lot of your followers if you're developing your following or something like that. And then, explore other formats to host the larger podcasts. So there's a lot of ways to go about it. And I know that unfortunately, it feels like sometimes a lot of these ways are on social media. And I know that we all feel like we're really, what is the word? That we're all kind of always looking to the algorithm in order to sustain our careers. But hopefully there's a little bit of both. Hopefully there's a little bit of balance. And yeah. you can find some joy in it.
So a couple more questions. So Rumbi says, what platforms do your team members use to find new music to review, please? How can we make ourselves more visible? So I guess we just kind of covered that there, right, as well. It's just, I guess,
I mean, various ones.
well.
Sometimes it's like you go to a show and then you hear really amazing music that someone plays out, and then you try to Shazam it, or you're asking the DJ and you're begging them to see like their track list or something. Anything from mixes, if you can be on a mix, and I generally try to look for the track list in a mix as well. Always digging through SoundCloud, various SoundCloud links. How do we make ourselves visible? Yeah, there's not just one way. I guess. Let's see. Yeah, there's like the in real life bit, and then it's usually through like word of mouth too. Like I really listen to what the music community really likes. So like, oh, we hear about this new artist. Sometimes I do hear it on social media. Like I remember someone put early on Naya Archives, when she was just like blowing up. I remember hearing it on someone's like video on Instagram. I remember like, what is this track? Like immediately I remember asking what this track was and hunting Naya Archives down. So there's that element. In terms of platforms, I guess that there's a medley, whether it's in real life or social media. Also, I do a lot of reading as well. So maybe like what other places cover, but SoundCloud sometimes. But yeah.
This one about non-performing songwriters, I'd say one of my friends is kind of publishing, writing like as poetry first, and then turning it into songs. So it's kind of like half letting some of the song go as writing as kind of prose and stories, and then it's like, okay, later on people have realized that, okay, these were actually songs the whole time. So just trying to like experiment with formats. And so like, yeah, if you're a producer, then experiment with video. If you're a songwriter, experiment with poetry. If you're a poet, experimenting with songwriting, like, and overlapping all of these different things on different platforms, and just finding different ways of like giving those songs to people. If you want to write for other people, then it's like how you're finding that song in someone's lap. So if someone's on your level maybe, or that is in your community, and you can say, hey, I've written this amazing song, like putting it in their lap in a format that they're going to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, there's one question for musicians interacting with music journalists. Would you be expected to be contacted directly, and what would you want to see or be told by the musician reaching out to promote themselves? The best way, I think that the best way to go about this. So obviously in that example that I had about Toshiki Ota, we had a personal connection, but if you don't have a personal connection with an editor, but you have someone who is willing to pitch you and your story as a music journalist, then that's the best way to go about it. Because obviously, like I like the fact that there is a writer who's already willing to vouch for you and is willing to tell your story to the fullest extent that it needs to be told. So that's probably the best way if there's not like a personal connection there necessarily.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I think that's like cool. You've worked for so many things, like, so I really appreciate it. And if there's any last questions, I'm gonna give you like 10 seconds to just get it off. We good? Yeah, all right. Thanks everyone for coming. Thank you, Whitney. Amazing. And Whitney's dropped her email there as well. So, and you've already have a connection with her now. That's just like the
exactly.
And yeah, remember guys that the fund is closing on the 23rd of May. So people that are going to apply, take a look at the guidance, and if there's any like kind of questions, creatives@youthmusic.org.uk is like the place for questions. And have a good evening. Yeah, so
thank you everyone. I hope you enjoyed yourselves, and good luck with your application / your journeys across the music industry. Goodbye.
thank you.